The scent of sautéed garlic and simmering demi-glace used to be the perfume of my world, a comforting, invigorating aroma that spoke of passion and purpose. I was Reese Kincaid, 32 years old, and Cincinnati, Ohio, was my canvas. For years, I'd poured my heart and soul into the kitchen of the Gilded Spoon, a vibrant bistro nestled in the heart of downtown, climbing the ranks from line cook to assistant manager. The clatter of pans, the sizzle of butter, the controlled chaos of a busy Friday night, it all felt like home. My dream was simple, to one day open my own place, a small, intimate spot where every dish told a story, where the food was honest and the atmosphere welcoming. I lived for that dream, saved every extra dollar, and spent my evenings sketching menus and floor plans on crumpled napkins. Then came Julian Sterling. He swooped in, charismatic and smooth, an investor who promised to elevate the Gilded Spoon to a new level of culinary excellence. On the surface, he was everything a burgeoning restaurant needed: a polished demeanor, an expansive network, and a silver tongue that could charm the city's elite. He spoke of Michelin stars and national recognition, painting a dazzling future for the bistro. We, the existing staff, were cautiously optimistic, ready to embrace the changes he promised. Little did I know, his words were nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion, a gilded cage designed to trap unsuspecting souls. The changes started subtly at first. Ingredients were swapped for cheaper alternatives, portions became smaller, and maintenance, especially in the walk-in refrigerators and freezer units, seemed to be perpetually deferred. I, along with a few of the more experienced cooks, raised concerns. We pointed out the fading rubber seals on the refrigeration units, the fluctuating temperatures, the increasingly lax handling protocols for perishable goods. Sterling, always with a dismissive wave of his hand, would reassure us. "Budgetary constraints, Reese," he'd say, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "We're making necessary adjustments for long-term growth. Trust the process." His glib responses chipped away at my faith, but I told myself it was just growing pains, a necessary evil for future success. The cracks, however, widened with each passing week. A young, inexperienced dishwasher, fresh out of culinary school, started filling in for prep work during lunch shifts. His name was Ben, and he was eager but overwhelmed, often rushing through tasks without proper guidance. I tried to train him, to instill the rigid discipline food safety demanded, but Sterling would frequently pull me away from management duties, leaving Ben unsupervised. I'd warned Sterling repeatedly about Ben's lack of attention to detail, specifically his tendency to leave raw poultry uncovered or to cross-contaminate cutting boards. My concerns, like all the others, were brushed aside. "He'll learn, Reese," Sterling insisted. "He's a good kid, don't hover." Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a Saturday, one of our busiest, the air thick with the scent of roasted duck and the buzz of excited diners. The kitchen was a maelstrom of controlled chaos, orders flying, pans clanging. Amidst the rush, a critical error occurred. A large batch of chicken, destined for our popular chicken piccata, had been left out unrefrigerated for far too long due to a malfunctioning cooler unit that Sterling had promised to fix for weeks. I discovered it, the moment of sickening realization hitting me like a physical blow. The temperature was dangerously high. The chicken was compromised. I immediately brought it to Sterling's attention, my voice hushed but urgent. "Julian, this chicken is bad. We can't serve it. The cooler, it's been off all day." He looked at me, then at the chicken, then back at me, his eyes calculating. The dining room was packed, our reservations were fully booked. "Nonsense, Reese, it's fine, just chill it quickly, flash freeze it." My stomach churned. "Julian, no, it's past the danger zone. We could make people seriously ill. This is a health code violation, we need to toss it." His jaw tightened. "Toss it? Are you insane? That's $200 worth of product, Kincaid, just get it ready, we're slammed." I stood my ground, trembling slightly. "I can't do that. My name is on this kitchen. My integrity is on this kitchen." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Your name, Reese, is already carved into the stone of this restaurant, as is mine. If this goes south, we both go down. Now, are you going to be a part of the solution, or are you going to be a problem?" The pressure was immense. He wasn't asking, he was telling. I felt the weight of my dream, the years I'd invested, pressing down on me. I knew what I should do, but the thought of defying him, of jeopardizing my position, my future, was paralyzing. I made a terrible, cowardly choice. I didn't serve it directly, but I didn't stop him from finding another way to salvage the product, a way that involved blending it into a soup base, hoping the heat would kill everything. It was a desperate, foolish gamble. A few days later, the storm broke. Health inspectors descended upon the Gilded Spoon like vultures, their faces grim. Several patrons had reported severe food poisoning. The investigation was swift, thorough, and merciless. They found the compromised chicken, traced the origin, and scrutinized every temperature log, every sanitation record. And then the ultimate betrayal, Julian Sterling, standing before the inspectors, his face a mask of profound disappointment, pointed directly at me. Reese Kincaid, he stated, his voice laced with feigned sorrow, was solely responsible for managing the kitchen operations that night. I entrusted him completely. He assured me everything was up to standard. This is a tragic oversight on his part, a failure of judgment and diligence. My world imploded. My name, Reese Kincaid, suddenly became synonymous with negligence, with food poisoning, with professional misconduct. The local news ran stories with headlines like "Assistant Manager Blamed for Bistro's Food Poisoning Scandal," and my face, pulled from old staff photos, was plastered across screens. Sterling, the cunning serpent, had expertly shifted the blame, making me the fall guy, the scapegoat. He offered a tearful public apology, expressing his deep regret for having placed too much faith in an unproven manager. He even offered to pay for the medical bills of those affected, further cementing his image as the responsible, compassionate owner. I was fired, effective immediately, blacklisted from every reputable establishment in Cincinnati and likely beyond. My culinary career, my dream, lay in ruins, shattered by a lie. The days that followed were a blur of shame and despair. My phone didn't ring with job offers, but with calls from angry former colleagues, bewildered friends, and even a few journalists looking for a sensational follow-up story. I stopped answering. I stopped leaving my apartment. The vibrant scents of the kitchen were replaced by the stale air of defeat. I walked the streets of Cincinnati, the familiar landmarks now mocking me. Every restaurant, every bustling cafe was a painful reminder of what I had lost, of the future that had been stolen. I was adrift, a ghost in my own city. I found myself obsessively replaying that night, every warning I'd given, every instant Sterling had dismissed my concerns. The injustice of it all festered inside me, a dark, growing tumor of resentment. Julian Sterling continued to thrive even after the scandal. The Gilded Spoon temporarily closed, rebranded, and reopened under a new name, with Sterling still at the helm, his reputation miraculously intact. He was a master manipulator, a survivor who built his success on the backs of others, then discarded them without a second thought. Reese Kincaid, once full of hope, was now simply jaded. My culinary dreams were dead, buried under a mound of false accusations. But in their place, a new, far more potent desire began to bloom, the quiet, methodical hunger for revenge. I knew with every fiber of my being that Sterling's pattern of negligence wasn't a one-off. He was a professional risk-taker, always skirting the edge of disaster, always ready to sacrifice someone else to save his own skin. I vowed that he would answer for what he had done, not just to me, but to anyone else he might have exploited. The seed was planted. And if you're looking for more stories of justice served, make sure to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The first few years after the incident were a blur of survival. My savings dwindled and I took odd jobs, anything to pay the rent and keep food on the table. I worked nights stocking shelves at a big box store, then spent my days delivering packages, the anonymity of the work a strange comfort. It was a life far removed from the bustling kitchens I once loved, a gray existence devoid of the vibrant flavors and creative energy that had once defined me. The jadedness clung to me like a second skin, dulling my senses, muting my emotions. I rarely spoke about what happened, the shame still too raw, the anger too volatile. But beneath the surface, the quiet obsession with Julian Sterling continued to simmer. I knew he hadn't changed. People like him rarely do. They are predators circling, waiting for the next opportunity to exploit, to profit, to discard. My vindication wouldn't come from proving my innocence to a world that had already judged me. It would come from exposing Sterling for the fraud he was, from laying bare his pattern of negligence and deception for everyone to see. This wasn't about clearing my name, not anymore. This was about dismantling his empire, brick by fraudulent brick. My new life, though unfulfilling, inadvertently sharpened skills I hadn't known I possessed. The package delivery routes forced me to memorize street layouts, building specifics, and delivery schedules with uncanny precision. Stocking shelves taught me the meticulous art of inventory, of tracking, of finding what was needed in a chaotic system. I started applying these skills to Julian Sterling. My investigation began subtly, almost subconsciously. I'd spend hours in public libraries, poring over old newspaper archives, searching for any mention of Sterling's previous ventures, any whispers of past controversies. I learned about his early days, how he'd opened and swiftly sold off several small businesses, each time walking away with a profit while the businesses themselves often struggled or failed shortly after his departure. It was a pattern clear as day: quick profits, minimal investment in long-term infrastructure, and a tendency to vanish when things got too hot. I created a spreadsheet, a meticulous, ever-growing document of every piece of information I could gather: dates, addresses, business names, the names of past employees I could find online. I cross-referenced news articles with public records, piecing together a mosaic of his shady dealings. It was slow, painstaking work, often yielding nothing but dead ends. There were moments of profound despair, nights when I stared at the ceiling of my small apartment, feeling the weight of the task, the impossibility of it all. How could one man, stripped of his career and reputation, hope to bring down someone as entrenched and powerful as Julian Sterling? My frustration would boil over, a silent scream of injustice trapped in my throat. I would almost give up, tell myself it was a fool's errand, that I should just move on. But then the memory of that night, the look on Sterling's face as he lied, the taste of ash in my mouth, it would resurface, reigniting the cold fire within. One evening, while sifting through old business filings, I stumbled upon a small online forum for former employees of the Gilded Spoon and a few of Sterling's previous ventures. It was a dusty, rarely updated corner of the internet, but it was there. And there, amidst a handful of vague complaints about low wages and long hours, was a post from someone identifying themselves as Pastry Chef Pete. It was dated a year before my own incident. The post detailed a similar experience, a shipment of tainted ingredients, a health scare narrowly averted, and a close call with inspectors, all attributed by Sterling to a mishandling by the kitchen staff. The username gave me a lead. A quick search revealed a Peter Vance, a talented pastry chef who had suddenly left Cincinnati around the time of the incident described. He was now working in Denver. This was it, a crack in Sterling's impenetrable facade. My first attempts to contact Peter Vance were met with silence. I sent emails, left messages on social media, all politely worded, never revealing the full extent of my intentions. I simply introduced myself as Reese Kincaid, a former colleague from the Gilded Spoon, hoping to reconnect. Weeks passed, no response. I felt the familiar pang of disappointment, the crushing weight of a closed door. But patience, I had learned, was my most potent weapon. I knew that people who had been wronged often carried their bitterness in silence, fearing reprisal, or simply wanting to forget. I had to offer them something more than just a listening ear. I had to offer them a pathway to vindication. One day, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. It was from Peter Vance. His message was terse, cautious. "What do you want, Reese? If this is about the Gilded Spoon, I've moved on. I don't want any trouble." My heart pounded. He hadn't dismissed me outright. There was still a flicker of curiosity, a hint of unresolved pain. I crafted my reply carefully, choosing each word with surgical precision. I didn't accuse, didn't demand. I simply shared my own story, stripped bare, raw and honest. I explained how Sterling had scapegoated me, how my career had been destroyed, how I suspected it wasn't an isolated incident. I offered him a chance to share his side, promising only understanding, not judgment. I explained that I wasn't looking for money or fame, only to expose a pattern of negligence that could hurt others. Days turned into a week, then a phone call. Peter Vance. His voice was guarded at first, but as I spoke, as I recounted the details of my downfall, he began to open up. He described the pressure Sterling put on him to use substandard ingredients, to ignore food safety protocols. He recounted the night he discovered a batch of moldy flour that Sterling had purchased from a dubious supplier to save a few dollars. Peter had refused to use it, insisting on discarding it. Sterling had screamed at him, threatened his job, and then, with chilling calm, had simply blamed the supplier, forcing Peter to sign a document falsely claiming the flour was fine. Peter, scared and desperate, had signed it, then quit in disgust, leaving Cincinnati behind. The weight of that secret, of his unwilling complicity, had haunted him. "I've never told anyone this, Reese," he confessed, his voice heavy with years of unspoken shame. "I just wanted to forget it, to pretend it didn't happen." "I understand, Peter," I told him, my voice steady. "But what if we could make sure it never happens to anyone else? What if we could expose Sterling, not just for what he did to us, but for who he truly is?" That conversation was the turning point. Peter Vance became my first true ally, a testament to the fact that others had suffered at Sterling's hands. With Peter's cautious cooperation, I started to gain traction. He gave me names, dates, and even a few old emails and internal memos he had kept, documents that hinted at Sterling's cost-cutting measures and his dismissive attitude towards proper procedures. It wasn't a smoking gun, not yet, but it was proof of a deeply ingrained pattern. My transformation was complete. The grieving, despairing Reese Kincaid had been replaced by a quiet, determined strategist. My jadedness had morphed into a razor-sharp focus. I wasn't seeking vengeance for myself alone. I was seeking justice for all of Sterling's victims, past and future. I learned to leverage online networks, to use privacy-preserving tools to gather information, to connect the dots in seemingly disparate events. I realized that Sterling's ego was his greatest weakness. He loved the spotlight, the accolades, the image of himself as a culinary visionary. He was about to open a new, high-profile restaurant right here in Cincinnati, a grand, ostentatious affair called the Zenith, designed to solidify his reputation as the city's premier restaurateur. This, I knew, was my target. This would be his undoing. But bringing him down wouldn't be easy. He was a master of deception, surrounded by layers of legal protection and a network of loyal or simply terrified associates. I needed more than just Peter's testimony. I needed irrefutable proof, something that would resonate with the public and force a true reckoning. I needed to find a current victim, someone who was actively suffering under Sterling's negligence, someone I could help and who in turn could help me. The stakes were higher than ever, and I knew that one wrong move could send me spiraling back into the abyss I had just crawled out of. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but I was ready. My patience had been a slow-burning fuse, and now the fire was reaching its core. This was more than just revenge, it was a mission. And if you're finding this story as gripping as I am, don't forget to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. My patience, once a passive endurance, had evolved into an active, strategic weapon. I wasn't just waiting anymore, I was building, brick by painful brick, a case against Julian Sterling. The Zenith was Sterling's magnum opus, a towering glass and steel monument to his inflated ego, situated prominently on the riverfront. Its construction was meticulously documented in local media, its grand opening already the most anticipated culinary event of the year. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a legacy, one he was building on the backs of others, just as he had with the Gilded Spoon. I spent weeks observing the Zenith from afar. I learned the delivery schedules, the staff shifts, the patterns of Sterling's own appearances. I noticed the same hurried, corner-cutting decisions I had witnessed before: cheap, flimsy equipment being brought in, rushed construction, and a clear disregard for proper health and safety protocols during the building phase. It was a familiar, sickening tableau. My breakthrough came in the form of a young, aspiring chef named Chloe Miller. She was barely out of culinary school, bright-eyed and brimming with enthusiasm, a mirror image of my younger self. She was the Zenith's newest sous chef, a position she had landed through sheer talent and a bit of luck. I saw her face in a local newspaper feature, beaming as she stood beside Sterling, who had his arm draped paternally around her shoulders. The sight sent a chill down my spine. I knew instinctively that she was his next victim. I couldn't approach her directly, not at first. My name was still mud in culinary circles, and Sterling undoubtedly would have warned his staff against any disgruntled former employees. So I observed. I watched Chloe from a distance, noting her long hours, the tired slump of her shoulders, even as her smile remained fixed for public appearances. I saw the telltale signs of pressure mounting. One rainy Tuesday evening, I saw her leaving the Zenith after midnight, looking utterly defeated. She sat on a bench outside, hunched over, clutching a coffee cup, the glow of her phone illuminating her tear-streaked face. It was my chance. I walked past casually, then doubled back, pretending to check my phone. As I drew level with her, I deliberately dropped a small, innocuous package of documents wrapped in a brown paper bag. It contained copies of my original termination letter, the newspaper clippings from the food poisoning scandal, and a carefully anonymized summary of Peter Vance's account, detailing Sterling's pattern of negligence. No names, no accusations, just facts, enough to sow a seed of doubt. I quickly picked up the bag as if by accident and muttered an apology, making sure to show her the contents just for a split second. "Oh, sorry," I said, looking flustered. "Just some old work papers, long story." I met her gaze for a fleeting moment, a silent plea for understanding in my eyes. Then I quickly walked away, leaving her to process the brief, unsettling glimpse of my past. The next day she didn't show up for her shift. Sterling was reportedly furious. I knew she'd read the papers, that the seed had taken root. A few days later I saw her again, this time at a quiet coffee shop, staring blankly into her laptop screen. She looked even more exhausted, her youthful vibrancy replaced by a deep worry. I approached her carefully. "Chloe," I asked, my voice soft, almost a whisper. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide with recognition and fear. You're Reese Kincaid, aren't you, from the papers?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw you the other night. You looked troubled, and I think I know why." I pulled up a chair, not asking permission, my gaze steady. "Julian Sterling, right?" She flinched, then her eyes welled up. He's a nightmare. He's making us cut corners, Reese. He bought a batch of shellfish that's past its prime, claiming it's a special deal from a new supplier. He's pushing us to use it in the opening night menu. I told him it was risky, that it could make people sick. He just laughed at me, said I was too green, that I needed to toughen up. She buried her face in her hands, her voice muffled. "I don't know what to do. My name is on the line. My career is just starting." Her words were like a punch to the gut. It was my story, playing out all over again, years later, with a new victim. "I know, Chloe," I said, my voice filled with a quiet intensity. "I know exactly what that feels like. He did the same thing to me. He made me the scapegoat for a food poisoning incident at the Gilded Spoon, ruined my life." I spent the next few hours detailing my entire experience, from the compromised chicken to Sterling's calculated betrayal. I showed her the emails from Peter Vance, explained the pattern. Her initial fear slowly transformed into outrage, then a fierce resolve. "He needs to be stopped, Reese," she declared, her eyes burning with a newfound fire. "He can't keep doing this to people." Chloe became my vital insider. She was meticulous, intelligent, and deeply principled. She started documenting everything, taking photos of the expired shellfish, recording conversations with Sterling where he dismissed her concerns, meticulously noting temperature logs and ingredient deliveries. She confirmed my suspicions about the structural issues in the kitchen, the shortcuts taken in the plumbing, the hastily installed ventilation system that was already struggling. She was risking everything, and I respected her immensely for it. But getting this evidence to the right people and making it stick was the next monumental challenge. Sterling was powerful and his public relations machine was formidable. I knew the media would jump on a sensational story, but it needed to be undeniable, supported by multiple sources. I needed someone beyond Chloe and Peter, someone official. My thoughts turned to the health inspector who had handled my case years ago, a grizzled, no-nonsense woman named Detective Miller. She had seemed genuinely disturbed by the conditions at the Gilded Spoon, even if she couldn't prove Sterling's direct culpability then. I tracked her down, now retired, living a quiet life on the outskirts of Cincinnati. It took several attempts, but I finally secured a meeting. She remembered me, her gaze was sharp, assessing. "Reese Kincaid," she said, her voice flat. "I remember your file, a messy business." It was, Detective, messier than you know. Sterling scapegoated me, and he's doing it again, at the zenith. I laid out everything, my years of meticulous research, Peter Vance's testimony, and most importantly, Chloe's current, irrefutable evidence. I showed her the photos, the recorded conversations, the logs. I explained Sterling's modus operandi, his pattern of putting profits over safety. She listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally nodding, her eyes narrowing. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long moment, then let out a deep sigh. I always had a feeling about Sterling. He was too smooth, too quick to blame others. We just couldn't get anything concrete on him back then. This is different. This is a pattern of criminal negligence. You've done your homework, Kincaid. She agreed to help, but on her terms. She knew the legal system, the loopholes Sterling would exploit. We couldn't just go to the press with a handful of accusations. We needed to orchestrate a situation that would force him into the open, a trap he couldn't escape. She had a contact at a major local news channel, an investigative journalist known for her tenacity and integrity. She would connect me, but only once we had everything perfectly in place. Our plan coalesced. The grand opening of the Zenith was less than a month away, a star-studded gala with city officials, food critics, and prominent figures in attendance. It was Sterling's moment of triumph, his vindication after the Gilded Spoon scandal. It was also, I decided, the perfect stage for his downfall. The plan was intricate, multi-layered, and hinged on absolute precision. Chloe would ensure the problematic shellfish was indeed used on opening night, documented every step of the way. I would coordinate with Peter Vance to provide supplementary documentation and, if necessary, a public statement. Detective Miller would ensure that the health department and appropriate legal bodies were ready to act the moment the evidence broke. My task was to orchestrate the public revelation, to ensure the story reached the widest possible audience in a way that couldn't be dismissed as mere slander. I had spent years in the shadows, quietly collecting my pieces. Now it was time to play them. The anticipation was a living thing inside me, a coiled serpent ready to strike. The bitterness hadn't faded, but it had transmuted into something colder, sharper. This wasn't personal anymore. It was pure, unadulterated justice. And I, Reese Kincaid, the man Julian Sterling had tried to erase, would be its instrument. The final act was upon us, and the stage was set for Sterling's spectacular fall. The weeks leading up to the grand opening of the Zenith were a blur of intense, nerve-wracking preparation. Every waking moment was dedicated to the plan, a complex web of precise timing and calculated risks. Chloe, bless her courageous heart, was our inside man, meticulously documenting every deviation from health code standards. She'd send me encrypted photos of the expired shellfish being prepped, timestamped videos of faulty refrigeration units, and screenshots of internal memos where Sterling pressured staff to cut corners on hygiene and safety. Her detailed logs included dates, times, and even specific employee names Sterling had coerced into compliance. Her bravery was astounding, a stark contrast to my own quiet submission years ago. Meanwhile, I was working closely with Detective Miller, retired but still incredibly well-connected, and the investigative journalist she put me in touch with, a sharp, tenacious woman named Sarah Chen. Sarah had an uncanny ability to dissect a story, to find the human angle that would resonate with the public. She spent hours reviewing all the evidence I'd painstakingly gathered, Peter Vance's archived emails, my own documented timeline of the Gilded Spoon incident, and now Chloe's damning, real-time proof from the Zenith. Sarah was convinced we had a case, but she needed a spectacular unveiling, something that would cut through Sterling's PR machine and leave no room for doubt. Our plan revolved around the Zenith's opulent grand opening gala. This was Sterling's moment of triumph, a black tie affair attended by Cincinnati's elite, influential food critics and major investors. It was his opportunity to erase the stain of the gilded spoon and solidify his reputation as a culinary titan. And it was here, in front of everyone who mattered, that his meticulously constructed facade would crumble. The evening arrived, draped in a cool, late autumn chill. The riverfront glittered with the lights of the city, and the zenith blazed like a beacon, its glass facade reflecting the vibrant energy of hundreds of well-dressed guests. I stood across the street, in the shadowy alcove of an old brick building, watching the limousines pull up, a ghost in the crowd, unseen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. Years of simmering resentment, of meticulous planning, were about to culminate. Chloe was already inside, having confirmed earlier that the compromised shellfish had indeed been incorporated into the evening's signature appetizer, a delicate scallop ceviche. She had also discreetly placed a small, wireless camera near the main kitchen pass, pointed at the dish assembly area. The feed was streaming directly to Sarah Chen's laptop, hidden in a discreet van parked a block away, ready to be broadcast live at the precise moment. Our first move was subtle. At 7:30 p.m., as the cocktails flowed and the initial wave of appetizers began to circulate, a series of pre-programmed anonymous tips hit the health department's emergency hotline. These tips, crafted by Detective Miller, detailed specific, alarming violations at the Zenith, citing the use of compromised ingredients, unsanitary conditions, and faulty refrigeration. The sheer volume and specificity of the tips, coming from multiple sources, would flag immediate attention. At 8:00 p.m., as the main courses were being prepared, the first health inspector arrived, a low-key, professional woman known for her thoroughness. She wasn't there to shut down the place immediately. She was there to observe, to confirm. Her presence alone, a subtle but significant disruption, would put Sterling on edge. My role was to initiate the public exposure. I had arranged for a small, strategically placed drone, operated by a trusted anonymous contact, to fly a banner over the Zenith at 8:45 p.m., right as Sterling was scheduled to give his grand opening speech. The banner was simple, stark: the Zenith, built on lies, ask RHYSKINCAID. It was a direct call-out, a gauntlet thrown. As Sterling stepped onto the small stage in the main dining room, microphone in hand, his face radiating confidence, the drone soared into position. The banner unfurled, catching the lights of the building, starkly visible against the night sky. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Phones came out, snapping photos. Sterling's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then cold fury. He knew my name. This was Sarah Chen's cue. From her van, she launched her pre-recorded segment, seamlessly transitioning into a live feed from inside the Zenith's kitchen, courtesy of Chloe's hidden camera. The segment began with a quick recap of the gilded spoon scandal, juxtaposing Sterling's tearful public apology with my termination letter. Then the live feed, a shaky but clear shot of the prep area, where a cook, under duress from a clearly audible Sterling, was visibly struggling to trim spoiled parts from a pile of shellfish. Sterling's voice, though muffled, was unmistakable, urging the cook to just make it work, no one will notice. The segment then switched to pre-recorded interviews, Peter Vance speaking clearly and calmly from Denver, detailing his own experience with Sterling's negligence and how he was forced to cover up food safety violations. He provided copies of his old emails, now broadcast for millions to see. Then a short, powerful clip of Chloe's recorded conversation with Sterling, where he explicitly dismissed her concerns about the shellfish, calling her overly cautious and threatening her job if she didn't comply. Inside the Zenith, chaos erupted. The drone banner, the news report flickering on the large screens positioned around the room for promotional videos, the sudden murmur of the health inspector's presence, it all hit at once. Guests started exchanging panicked glances. One prominent food critic, who had just sampled the scallop ceviche, suddenly looked unwell. Sterling, initially flustered, tried to regain control. "This is a smear campaign," he bellowed into the microphone, his face contorted in a mask of outrage. A desperate attempt by disgruntled former employees, baseless accusations. But his words were drowned out by the rising crescendo of whispers, of people pulling out their phones to look up Sarah Chen's broadcast, of the growing unease. The health inspector, observing the live feed on her tablet, calmly walked towards Sterling, her face stern. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice cutting through the din, "we have serious concerns about the conditions in your kitchen. I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist on a full, immediate inspection. And I believe there are a few patrons who need immediate medical attention." The first public figures began to make hurried exits, their faces pale. The glamour of the gala evaporated, replaced by the chilling reality of a health crisis. Several patrons who had eaten the ceviche were now openly complaining of stomach cramps, one even rushing for the restrooms. The smell of fear was almost palpable. I watched it all unfold from my vantage point, a grim satisfaction spreading through me. Sterling's carefully constructed world was imploding in real time, but I wasn't done. I had one final, crucial piece to drop. A few minutes later, as emergency medical personnel arrived and the police began to manage the escalating situation, I used an anonymous burner phone to send a simple text message to Sarah Chen. It contained the exact, unedited video file of Sterling's chilling instruction to use the spoiled shellfish, a video Chloe had managed to get of Sterling explicitly ordering the use of the product while she discreetly recorded him with her phone, his face clearly visible, his words undeniable. Sarah, seeing the raw footage, immediately cut to it live on air. Sterling's voice, clear and cold, echoed through the main dining room as the broadcast played on the screens. "Just make it work," he commanded, gesturing towards the shellfish. "No one will notice. We have too much invested." His face, filled with contempt for his customers, was undeniable. The effect was devastating. The lie, the deceit, the utter disregard for human safety, it was all laid bare. There was no denying it, no spinning it. Sterling, caught red-handed, visibly deflated. The color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly pallor. His eyes darted around the room, full of desperate, trapped animal fear. Within minutes, the police, acting on the health inspector's official report and the live broadcast of the damning evidence, placed Julian Sterling under arrest. The charges were numerous: criminal negligence, endangerment of public health, and multiple health code violations. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, his face, once so smooth and charismatic, was a mask of utter defeat, his empire reduced to rubble. I didn't stay to watch the final act of his humiliation. My work was done. I walked away from the zenith, from the flashing lights and sirens, back into the quiet Cincinnati night. The air was cold, but I felt a strange lightness, a release from the heavy burden I had carried for years. My name would likely never be fully cleared in the public eye, my culinary career forever tainted. But Julian Sterling's reign of deceit was over, his pattern of negligence finally exposed. Chloe was safe, her career spared from his destructive path, and Peter Vance had found a measure of peace. My dream of owning a restaurant was still a ghost, a beautiful, impossible dream, but I had found a new purpose, a different kind of justice. Perhaps I would use my newfound skills for good, becoming an investigator, a silent guardian for those exploited by the unscrupulous. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something akin to hope, a quiet satisfaction that transcended simple revenge. It wasn't a triumphant cheer, but a deep, resonant sigh of vindication. The debt had been paid, the score had been settled, and for those who seek to right the wrongs of the world, remember, subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.